Hi, my name is Yasmin, and this podcast is called Life's Hard, What's Next?
I'm Matt. In this podcast, we want to talk about hard things and how we try to deal with them.
We do want to put out a disclaimer first. We know we are super privileged. We have food on the table, a warm house, and savings. But still, multiple things can be true at the same time. And even though we know we're lucky, life is hard. And usually things are easier if we talk about it. So that's what we're going to try and do here.
So, both of us have kind of gone through hard things, both of them a little bit different. So, we kind of want to talk about it just in the hopes of, sharing some information, sharing, some tips that helped us through it. Might help someone, might not. We're going to back it up with some statistics, but at the moment, we're going to start off with Yaz. So, I'm going to pass it over to her to start off with.
Yeah, so I'm 28 right now, but when I was 17 to 18 years old, I heavily restricted food for a couple of years of my life, and I thought it would be a good thing to talk about.
So, it might be good to start off with is what is a definition of an eating disorder? So, an eating disorder is a psychological condition that heavily impacts a person's relationship with food. So, as we know, there's lots of different types of eating disorders out there. There's anorexia, bulimia, there's overeating. So, what one did you sort of have there, yes?
So I was never officially diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I definitely would say that I had orthorexia. I was very obsessive about what I ate and things being healthy. I also heavily restricted food. So I probably was either anorexic or very borderline anorexic.
All right, so literally, what happened? What brought you down that track?
So the story goes, I was, 17, 18 years old, and something happened in my brain where I thought to myself, right, this is the summer before I start university, where I'm going to lose weight. I was sick of being the chubby one, the cute one, and I wanted to change it. So I did. That summer, I went to the gym 7 days a week. I heavily restricted my food. It started off quite small. I wouldn't eat dessert, I wouldn't eat bread, and slowly I got to a point where my portions were tiny, and at one point I was even weighing cabbage, which sounds a bit ridiculous in hindsight. It's partially my nature. I mean, Matt will know this because he's married to me, and has been with me for 5 years. When I decide to do something, I go for it. And I have a very blinders up, tunnel vision sort of mentality sometimes. It's something I'm really aware of now, so I am very careful to not let myself go down that path. But as strange as it sounds for me, making the decision of I'm going to lose weight is enough to, start that domino effect.
So the whole thing started really with you wanting to lose weight.
Mm.
So, not to be rude or ask questions. So, what would you size wise, what would you have been before you started?
Not very big at all. I mean, I weigh more now than what I did before I started this, to give you some context. And it's an interesting thing. I mean, hindsight is 2020, as they say. But at that stage, I felt unattractive. I felt chubby. But really, I look back on my photos and I look like a normal 18, 17-year-old. I think the tricky thing is, though, at that time, I mean, it's better now, but not perfect. But yeah, at the time, we didn't have a lot of representation of anyone that basically wasn't a size 0 on magazines. So compared to them, sure, I carried more weight. But, we're talking the early 2000s where the heroin chic physique was considered popular.
So, it was some weird times thinking back on it, So, with you said that you reduced food. So, what did you start off eating before you went into it? So, was it like unhealthy, more volume, or?
No, not at all. I mean, I probably ate like most 16, 17-year-olds. I definitely enjoyed chocolates and desserts and sweets and stuff like that. I was born in Jordan and come from a Middle Eastern household where we value food hugely, like a lot of communities. And we do have a decent amount of rice and potatoes and pasta and stuff like that in our diet, but we also eat a lot of vegetables and stuff like that. So, I mean, again, in hindsight, I would say I ate a pretty balanced. Sorry, I ate a pretty balanced diet before all of this started. But I think the thing that I wasn't doing is I wasn't consistently exercising because I was never good at sports as a kid. So that's probably the one thing that it was actually good that I got into fitness because of all of this, one of the silver linings, I should say. But really, I mean, again, I probably eat exactly the same now as I did when I was 17.
So you went from a pretty decent all-round diet to what did you end up like? Was it slight changes to start with, or like you said, or straight to measuring cabbage?
No, yes, definitely slight changes. I mean, we all have that mentality of, there's 2 biscuits left in the tin. I'm just going to finish the 2 biscuits left in the tin.
Open a packet, and it's just me.
Or that. So, of course, I had that kind of mentality at times. And I mean, again, I've almost reverted back to how I was before then. I still do now. And that was one of the first things I decided. So I decided, no, I'm not going to have the last 2 pieces of biscuits. And then eventually I decided, no, I'm only going to have 1 biscuit today. And then once that was said, I decided, actually, I'm not going to have any biscuits at all. And then once that was said, I decided, actually, I'm not going to have any bread anymore. So it was small steps, small progressive changes, and it was almost like every time I managed to control an aspect of my eating, anytime I managed to cut out dessert completely, cut out bread completely, or whatever it was, it felt like a win, and then I would build on it, but not in a good way. I would be more restrictive.
So essentially you just add on, you just take one thing, get past one, and then be like, okay, I've cut out bread, for example. Let's cut out sugar altogether. It was kind of, so there wasn't like a substitution in mind, it was just a cutout.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there was some small substitutions, like I did try and like eat more vegetables and stuff like that, but it was mostly just reducing portion sizes and cutting things out and eliminating things, which, I mean, I'm not a dietitian, I'm an optometrist, so I'm by no means an expert on food, but I have a good friend who is a dietitian, and I know in conversations that we've had, one of the things that they try and avoid telling people is to cut out food groups. It's not a healthy thing to do, and that's partially why things like the keto diet aren't good for you and aren't sustainable, because we're not meant to cut out any food groups.
Yeah, the keto one's a different story altogether, isn't it? Like we've both been into our fitness at certain points, and we know about certain diets and those kind of things.
Yeah. Could do a whole podcast episode on just the keto diet, to be honest.
Literally, it's quite fascinating. Probably should just throw this in. Both Yaz and I do work in healthcare, not directly in line with like mental health or food. But we do have a bit of a background in it. We've both been into our fitness. We've both been into our sports. So we do have a decent understanding in terms of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just a disclaimer, FYI.
Not experts, but like we kind of know what we're talking about.
On a basic level, we're not like food scientists, but hey. So in terms of that, do you kind of know what your calorie count got down to? Like food-wise? If you had to think about it, like how many a day?
I would hope that I never got under 1,000, but I could have easily been under 1,500 for a long time, I would say. And just to clarify, I know I said before that I worked out 7 days a week. Not only did I work out 7 days a week for an hour at the gym, I would walk home from the gym, which was about a half an hour walk, and I was working part-time / almost full-time over the summer at McDonald's and doing like 6-hour shifts, 8-hour shifts, sometimes longer. So I would be doing these big days at work where I was on my feet all day, as anyone who has worked in a fast food restaurant knows, and then exercise as well and walk home. And I did that literally 7 days a week. Like, again, this is where the the blinders up mentality comes in, where for me, I'm going to work out every day literally means I'm going to work out every day.
What sort of workouts was it? Was it like high cardio? Because I know that you're into powerlifting now. Was it powerlifting back then?
No. Actually, getting into powerlifting was one of the things that helped me pull myself out of the restrictive eating, which we can talk about in a little bit. But it was mostly like walk on the treadmill for 10 minutes, warm up, and then just do very general like bodybuilding, weightlifting sort of program. So nothing too crazy. I think the main thing that led to me losing so much weight was how restrictive I was with what I was eating.
So in terms of, while we're here, it's a good segue into it. So how did you get through it? Like you said, it took about 2 years.
Yeah, it took a long time.
So I mean, how did you seek help? Where did you go to? You know, what actually, got it across your mind to get you out of that the blinders?
So yeah, I mean, it started that summer of my last year of high school as I was about to start university, and I think I knew when I started university on some level that I would need to make some changes because I was studying biomedical sciences, which is very, very hard. I wasn't applying for medicine, but it's the same program that a lot of people who are applying to medicine do. So I knew going into it that it was going to be really tough academically. So I knew I would have to shift some of what I was doing. I was also living in a hall of residence, so I knew I wouldn't have access to food all the time the way that I did at home, so when it was meal times, I would just have to eat. So I had already lost quite a bit of weight that summer, and what happened when I went to university is I did cut down from 7 days a week to 5 days a week, and I did start...
Is this fitness-wise?
Yeah, going to the gym. And I did start to eat a little bit more. I'm pretty sure at the beginning of the year I started to incorporate bread again, but I was still very restrictive with what I ate. Like, I wouldn't eat outside meal times, I wouldn't snack, I didn't have dessert, I think, any day while I was at university. And
that's just rough.
Yeah. I mean, anyone who's like lived in accommodation knows that they literally have dessert out, lunch and dinner, every single day.
And the dessert's normally like the best part.
Yeah, and I mean, I was paying for it, right? So I'd already paid for it, and even still, I didn't have it. And it's not because I don't like sweets. I mean, I don't like sweets the way you like sweets, Matt. I don't have the same level of sweet tooth.
We're not talking about me right now.
But like, I like dessert, but I just didn't. And again, this is where the whole, if I set rules for myself, I follow those rules.
Mm-hmm.
And once I've set those rules, it's very hard for me to pull myself out of it, or I have to almost sit down and make a plan for it. Like, I can't be spontaneous, and definitely back then I couldn't be spontaneous with what I ate. It kind of went against every rule that I had set for myself, so that I could be safe, basically.
So how did you get through it though?
Yeah, so losing weight, and then I started to notice the negative physical impacts. At my lightest, I got down to 37 kgs.
We might see some photos, is that alright?
Yeah, there's photos on my Instagram, but I'm happy to pop some up as well. And I mean, for context, I'm 4'11", so 37 kgs isn't as bad as it sounds, but it's still pretty bad. And for context now, I'm like anywhere between 55 to 62 kgs. I kind of bounce between that sort of range. And actually, I was about 55 kgs before I started this whole I need to lose weight, I'm too chubby business. But yeah, I started to feel the physical impacts of it. So clothes weren't fitting me properly. I was starting to lose my hair. I didn't have a period for basically 2 years. I had absolutely no libido. It was very, very... it was starting to impact me physically in a negative way. So
what was the one side what was that one sign that you got, which was like, I should go and sort this out?
Not having my period, definitely. And that's also partially because I have a brown mother who, when she knew about that, she was like, all right, we need to get you to the doctors. And that's kind of another part of the story, is that, probably within 3 to 6 months, I realized on some level that I'd gone too far, and I was in and out of the doctors so many times, and they would do blood tests, and it would come back with nothing. And maybe there'd be minimal comments about my weight at the beginning, but no one really said anything, or if they did, they would just say, okay, you need to gain weight, but no one told me how or asked me what I was eating. I remember once asking a doctor point blank, okay, what should I eat to gain weight? And she literally said, I don't know. She didn't say, I don't know, but like, let me refer you to the correct resources, or I don't know, but here's a website that you can go to. She just said, I don't know, and moved on to the next thing. So it was really hard to get support from that point, because I think it was clear to most people that saw me that I had lost too much weight. But to be fair, maybe it wasn't super clear to the doctors because they didn't know what I looked like beforehand, but the people who knew me. But the period thing was huge. And then even once the doctors, I think, had realised, even once the doctors realised that on some level it was my weight, they still didn't refer me to mental health services. They didn't try and figure out why I was restricting my eating so much. It was just kind of slap a band-aid on it. So one of the things that they did was they prescribed me this thing called Ensure, which they give to people who are unwell, going through chemo, going through radiation, or older patients who can't keep down food, to try and boost their calories. So I got prescribed just cans and cans and cans of that. But again, nobody actually investigated why I wasn't eating enough.
So whenabouts in this process did they prescribe you that?
Probably about a year in.
So this is a year into seeing the doctors?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, six months to a year. It took a long time for people to really pay attention. And again, I think the only reason really the doctors were paying much attention is because my mum was pushing. My mum was like, it's not normal for a, person her age to not have her period for so long.
Can I just also say though, like, I've seen the pictures of you at that point. I don't know how they could look at you and be like, oh, everything's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I guess again, that's the whole thing where it's relative. Like, if you knew what I looked like beforehand in comparison, it does look unhealthy. But I mean, again, this is
even just looking at you before knowing that you still look pretty unhealthy in those photos.
That's true. But I guess this is, and we could probably do a whole episode about this, this is the tricky thing with GPs who, in my opinion, have the most thankless job in the world, having 10 to 15 minutes to deal with anything. So, a GP who doesn't have a lot of experience in mental health support, doesn't have a lot of experience in eating disorders, is just going to say, well, just eat more, or let's run some bloods. Oh, well, the bloods have all come back fine, so there mustn't be a problem. Or, let's prescribe you some supplements and see if we can boost your weight that way. But the real... I like to describe me eating again, or starting to eat again, as kind of a series of light switches that had to flick through my brain. So one of them was me realizing that it was unhealthy for me to not have my period, and that was kind of a switch going off saying, damn, something needs to change. And I tried to make the change. I tried to eat more. I even wrote myself a plan that was high in calories, that had like dates and peanut butter and bananas, and counted all the calories and was aiming for like 1,700 or whatever, right? Like I was trying, but that was one switch in my head. The second switch was everybody telling me at some level that I needed to eat more / gain weight, especially the people close to me that really noticed it.
Can I be a little bit rude here? I remember your sister saying that she was actually quite scared of you when you're at
she
your
was like
thinnest point.
10, 11, so pretty young. And then the third switch was, so I was studying biomedical science, like I said, and I came across a chapter in the textbook called the Female Athlete's Triad, and it describes a condition where girls in their kind of teenage years / late teen years who exercise a lot, restrict their food, eventually start to break their bones because they're not getting enough nutrients, and usually they lose their periods. And I was like, shit, that's me. I exercise a lot, I knew that. I wasn't eating enough, I knew that. I didn't have my period. And I think it was the realization that I was actually doing long-term damage to my body that made me think I need to change something. Because, I mean, yes, there was an element of vanity going into this. There was definitely an element of vanity of me wanting to look a certain way. But some of what I was doing was trying to be healthier. I mean, I truly thought, and this is one of the issues with the fitness industry, I truly thought that I was helping myself and that I was working towards being healthier. And yeah, if we're going to continue this analogy of switches flicking in my head, Another thing that happened was my brother, who never gives advice. I mean, you know, Ahmed, Matt, he is the kind of person who just kind of lets everybody do their own thing. But he gently suggested to me that I go and see a counsellor. And when someone who never gives advice to people say something, you're much more likely to pay attention. So I went to the counsellor because I was lucky enough to be at university and we had free counselling available to us. I remember I was so nervous, and she put me at ease immediately. She asked me about my family, she asked me about study, she asked me about just general life stuff, and then we kind of slowly eased into the food. And one of the things she asked me to do was write down what I was eating. So I proudly wrote this plan that I had made for myself with all my calories that I was using to try and gain weight. And the counsellor looks at this piece of paper and says, okay, add one piece of food. So, okay. And I spent like 20 to 30 minutes of the counselling appointment just stressing about it. By the end of the appointment, I couldn't tell her what to add. I couldn't think of a single thing to add.
See, in my mind straight away, I go like chocolate, lollies, like something sweet, easy.
Whereas like in my head back then, it was like, well, I need to sit down, I need to work out the calories, and I need to figure out how this fits into my plan, and when during the day will I eat it, and blah, 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 blah. Again, it's like the control thing, right? Which is what they say about eating disorders. I mean, again, I'm not an expert, you're not an expert, but from what we understand about eating disorders, it is often about control rather than food. Food is just an easy thing to control. So for someone to tell me to do that was a loss of control. And that's actually exactly what the counsellor did. She pointed that out to me. By the end of the session, she said to me, you could have added an apple, you could have added a banana, you could have added ice cream with friends. And she said to me, you need to regain and reclaim the love for food that you used to have, and remember that it isn't just fuel. I mean, it is fuel, but food serves so much more in our culture. It serves as a way to connect people. And she was reminding me of that. She encouraged me to go and have cake with my friends, to go and have ice cream with my friends, and kind of really emphasized to me, but in a nice way. I mean, I don't remember the language she used specifically, but obviously whatever she said worked. But she emphasized to me, and definitely me not being able to add a single thing, not even an apple, to my day, really, sent the message home that I had a problem with food.
So if I ask you now, what would you add to your list?
Depends on the day.
No, just generally.
But like in summer, like a real fruit ice cream.
Okay, there you go. Easy. I still like how there was a bit of thought behind it.
I love real fruit ice cream, yeah. I mean, I haven't lost that aspect of my personality, because some of it is just my nature. I am not always, but can be very much a rigid and regimented person. And I like to have my plan, I like to follow my plan. Maybe fries, actually, if I can change that. I think I'd almost never say no to fries and a bowl of mayo.
I was going to say, normally you're a savoury gal anyway.
Yeah. But real fruit ice cream in the summer is pretty amazing. But yeah, I mean, that was the final switch in my head. And I've recounted the story to counsellors who have been amazed that that's all it took. And I guess I am really lucky that that's all it took. I mean, for a lot of people, it's years and years and years and years of battle, and a lifelong struggle. They have to be admitted to hospital. And yeah, from that moment, it was kind of like a, lightning bolt moment. And I stopped being so controlling about food. And to be honest, I very quickly gained weight. I mean, I know the doctors prescribed me like 24 cans of that Ensure supplement at one point.
Does it taste nice?
I don't know if you're supposed to have this like this, so like ignore me. Again, I'm not a professional. I can tell you about eyes, but not about nutrition or pharmacy. But what I used to do is I used to have the chocolate with hot water in winter, so it tasted a bit like a hot chocolate.
Yeah, so it kind of sounds a bit like a protein shake in a way.
Yeah, and it wasn't too bad cold either. Like it's nicer. I'd say it's nicer than a protein shake. But yeah, like, it's funny how the doctors were trying so hard and just like, again, Band-Aid. And then I have one counselling session and I actually start to gain weight.
Wait, so it was only one counselling session?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. And this is what I mean. I've like told counsellors the story before, and they've been like, "What?" I mean, I did go like 3 or 6 months after, probably closer to the 6 month mark, when I was actually like heavier than I was when I started, and I'm starting to kind of beat myself up a little bit about the gaining weight. So I kind of went in, I guess you could call it like for a tune-up, and the counsellor got me to like write down things about myself that I liked that had nothing to do with my weight. So, I think I wrote something like, I like the fact that I have long eyelashes and that I can lift heavy weights and stuff like that. And yeah, that helped. But really, one actual counselling session, and then 6 months later, just a little bit of a helping hand. But at that stage, I'd already gained the weight back and had my period back and was feeling better physically.
Just keep in mind with this here, everyone works at their own different paces.
Yeah, 100%.
So
I mean,
just because it worked, relatively one session for you doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do one session for another person, right?
100%. I would say I would be the exception to the rule. And I mean, again, neither of us are mental health experts, but I would say most people who are mental health experts would agree that I am the exception to the rule.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's kind of got us back to around the end of it. Or how long did it actually take you to fully come back to weight?
Again, not that long, like 3 to 6 months. It took a lot longer for me to really reach what I would call body neutrality, which is where I am now, where I generally don't care that much about how I look. I generally don't care about how I weigh. I eat pretty well, but I still have chocolate and ice cream and fries and all of that, and I don't think too much about it. It took me a lot longer to reach that stage of comfort that I'm at now, where, like we got married last year. I didn't diet for our wedding, which
Neither.
I think is...
Probably should have, but neither.
No. This is what I mean. Like, I think it's probably unusual, especially for most women, to not diet for your wedding and to have not even considered it. It wasn't something that I even entertained doing. But it took a long time to get to that, and it took a lot of things and a lot of tools to get to that stage. And I mean, to be honest, we could do a whole half an hour talking about just that. But yeah.
Yeah. So, it's all finished, it's all post up. Is there anything you need to be careful of now? Like any behaviours you need to watch in case you feel like you might slip back into it, or like any physical consequences from what you went through, or...
I'm very mindful to not let myself restrict, just in general, and to be wary of anything that might make me consider restricting. So, for example, I really enjoy powerlifting. I mean, I've done a few competitions for fun. I've never done it at a super serious level, but one of the reasons I've never done it at a super serious level is because when you really get into the nitty-gritty of powerlifting, you have to start cutting weight so that you can compete at a certain weight class. And people do often cut weight quite heavily so that they can compete at a weight class that makes them more competitive. So I just avoid it. I avoid anything that would require me or encourage me to do things like that. But again, I will say that's easy for me now. Like, I've reached a place in my mind where I just don't even think about it anymore. Things that helped with that was doing a sport like powerlifting, where you actually need to eat to be stronger, where you can focus on the weight that you're putting on the bar and not the scale. I did avoid weighing myself for years and years, but now weighing myself doesn't faze me at all. And probably the other big thing that I did for a while, again, it doesn't faze me anymore, but I unfollowed people who encouraged unrealistic beauty standards and unrealistic body types, and tried to fill my newsfeed and social media with people whose bodies looked more like mine. And in terms of long-term consequences, this is something I'm kind of literally going through as we speak. I did get like a body composition scan done recently when we joined a new gym, and I don't know how accurate these things are, but it did flag my bones. So I have an appointment with my nurse practitioner in a few weeks to have a chat about my bone density and whether I should be supplementing for vitamin D, or if there should be something, or if there's something or if there's something I should be wary of from that point of view. So, yeah, I think I probably have done irreversible damage to my bone health. But thankfully, from what I know, nothing else.
I was going to say as well with the bone health thing, I thought lifting's pretty good for strengthening around weaker bones and those kind of things, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah. So you're kind of already helping yourself out
Yep.
there in a way.
100%.
So I have one more question to ask you,
Mm-hmm.
but I've done a little bit of research and we've come up with 3 stats which I thought was quite interesting regarding eating disorders. Now this is from the National Eating Disorder Association, which we'll put the link up to on the website. Again, just goes to show how many people actually deal with this. So 9% of the US population has an eating disorder of some form. Quite a large amount if you think about it.
Huge.
Nearly 1/10. Eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of any psychiatric illness. So again, that's relatively quite high. I assume that one is more because of anorexia.
Yeah. People can get heart attacks if they're anorexic because the body basically just can't keep going.
Yeah, probably needs the calories. Is that about right? Yeah. And I found this one the most interesting. There has been a global increase from 3.5% to 7.8%, and that's between the years of 2000 to 2018. And that's an increase of eating disorders picked up amongst people.
That's crazy.
Probably, if you think about it, probably has something to do with the social media taking over a bit, being
I think
everywhere.
So. Yeah.
And then the last question, which I've got for you there, Yaz, is what's something you wish someone told you while you were going through it?
That's such a tricky one because on one level I would like to say that when you're in the depth of this, people can say almost anything to you, but if you aren't in the headspace to get better, it's going to be really, really hard for you to get better. You kind of have to almost come to it yourself, or definitely I should speak from my own experience. I think people just being there for you is really important, and being people that you can touch base with and talk to if you need to. Encouraging mental health support is probably the one thing I would say. I mean, that conversation with my brother potentially saved my life, really. And getting yourself in front of a mental health professional, getting yourself in front of a doctor, although unfortunately in my experience, I would hope this would be better because this was literally 10 years ago, but in my experience the counsellor was a million times more helpful than the doctors I interacted with. But getting yourself in front of the right people is so important. One thing I wish someone had told me before I started down this path is that thinness doesn't equal health or beauty or happiness, and that's something I learnt the hard way.
So basically the takeaway is if you're really going through anything like this, probably book in with your GP and a counsellor, probably double whammy it.
100%. And if you can bring someone with you to advocate for you, that is also a really good idea, because I mean, again, unfortunately GPs in this country are just so under the pump that it's often easy for them to either dismiss your concerns or just slap a band-aid on it the way they did with me for literally months and months, if not close to years. So having someone with you to push, to advocate, is so important. And I mean, thankfully most workplaces and definitely all universities have access to some level of counselling, which makes it more accessible. But I do hope that counselling can be more accessible in New Zealand soon, more widely accessible. There is also lots and lots of information online, and lots of support, including an eating disorder New Zealand organisation that we can also link.
Yeah, we'll definitely be linking some of those kind of things. And lastly, before we wrap this part up, anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. I think we've kind of well uncovered it. I think the fitness industry and media have a lot to answer for, but I think it is getting better. I think, the new season of Bridgerton really demonstrates that. You knew I'd bring Bridgerton
Oh,
into
I
this.
actually didn't expect it, to be fair.
But, like, you know, of course some of it was me. Some of the reason this happened is because of my personality and because of the way that I am. But some of it was growing up in a time where, again, it was glorified to be a body type that literally nobody can sustain. And things aren't perfect. I mean, celebrities are literally taking diabetes medication to be thin right now. But at the same time, we have someone who, I mean, she isn't even plus sized, but still, she's not a size 0. As the lead for a romance on a huge show like Bridgerton is pretty darn amazing. So that's probably the other thing I would say, is I would say being careful of the media you consume and the media you let your children and your teenagers consume is really important, because it has so much more of an impact on us than I think we realise.
I can even say, as a dude, a lot of weight talk, and that was, you know, around when I was growing up as well, and that was, you know, targeted at men as well. So it's not just men, it's not just women that go through this. Sorry,
100%.
both, you know, all genders go through it.
Yep. Dragon Ball Z, the Marvel movies.
Goku.
Everyone's got a bloody six-pack, and, like, again, realistically, Taylor Swift's boyfriend doesn't have a six-pack,
Yeah.
and he's a professional athlete. Like, why are we putting unrealistic body types on a pedestal and then making everybody who doesn't have bodies like this feel like a failure, when realistically even these celebrities don't look like this all the time? They only look like this because they have personal chefs, personal trainers, Photoshop, airbrushing, and they train for 6 hours a day to look that way for a role, and then they don't look like that the rest of the time. So why are we as day-to-day people expecting that of ourselves? It's insane. And again, I think the fitness industry and the media and Hollywood have a lot to answer for in this regard.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing your story on that. We do just want to do one quick thing. Now, Yaz is probably a better one to talk about this, but as she's talked a lot already through this conversation,
Rude.
you'll learn to know this. But
Learn to know what? That I'm the chatty one.
yeah, you are a chatty one.
Wow, okay. So rude.
Yeah, so what we're going to end up with is some gratitude. So I'll let Yaz talk you through that, since she likes this sort of area.
I thought that on a podcast where we literally want to talk about the fact that life's hard, okay, what are we going to do about it, or how are we going to try and deal with it, we could end each episode with a little bit of gratitude. Now, Matt thinks this stuff is cheesy, and it kind of is. Like, it is. It feels weird, it feels lame, but research does show that people who are grateful are happier. And learning to find moments of gratitude in your day-to-day life is really, really important for your mental health. Because if you can notice the beautiful blue sky or a flower when you're walking during your lunch break, hey, maybe you're not going to hate your life and your 9 to 5 so much. But yeah, so we're going to end on that. I'll start with mine.
Are we doing 1 or 3?
We could do 3.
I mean, you normally do 3, but
Okay.
I mean, it's up to you.
Let's do 3. So my 3 good things for today was we watched Inside Out, which was really lovely. I won't say any more on that because I think Matt wants to talk more about that. I had soup and some scrolls for lunch, which was really yummy, and I went for a walk at lunch.
I ended up doing a sauna today. Getting outside, doing firewood, you know, movement's good. And yeah, Inside Out, that's probably going to be a whole episode in itself, because that movie in itself is right in the feels. Lots to go through.
Lots of emotions.
Funny that you say that, because it's
Yeah.
about emotions. Yeah, but no, thank you for listening into the first episode. Thank you for putting up with us while we're learning our feet. Any suggestions, comments, topics, let us know in the comments.
And we do apologise in advance for what you probably heard the first 20 to 30 minutes of the episode, which is our dog eating his food, playing with his toys, and just being a menace. Thanks, Ted. We love you.